When I told them I was from Denmark, the locals said, "Oh, you're back to finish the job then." And that wasn't the welcome I expected on this tiny island in England. But let me rewind. Ever since I heard about this island where the Vikings first attacked England, the Holy Island, I just knew I had to go there at some point. So I planned this 3-day journey where my end goal was to go and see the Holy Island. And to be honest, you know, when I planned the trip, I was like, okay, these other places, I might as well go see them, but my expectations weren't that high. So I was a little bit shocked and surprised when I found out that I think this might well be the most underrated part of Britain. So join me for 3 days in the northeast of England, where I'll show you why you should start planning a trip to this part of the country. So I flew into Newcastle airport from Denmark via Amsterdam, and of course my plane was a wee bit delayed, so I had to run all the way through Schiphol airport in Amsterdam, and that was the workout I needed before landing in Newcastle airport, going out and seeing that yes, we are in the north of England, which means we're close to Scotland, which means you can get iron brew all over, and that was a welcome surprise for me there. Newcastle is home to around 300,000 people and surprisingly more bridges than Venice. This was once the coal capital that powered half of Europe, and the most famous of all these bridges, the Tyne Bridge here, actually inspired Sydney Harbour Bridge. The locals are called Geordies after King George II, who they absolutely loved around here. And the Geordies are famous for being some of the friendliest people in England. So I was well excited to see what it was all about, as this was my first visit to the northeast of England. I kept thinking I was like on the set of a Robin Hood movie. And I do know that he's from the Sherwood Forest down south in Yorkshire. But anyway, I kept thinking that I was on the set of a Robin Hood movie. And I went around and I filmed and I just you know, took in the city. It was raining. I put on some music from my favorite Geordie band, Maximo Park, and I just vibed with Newcastle straight away. You know, it's not a pretty city, but I just kind of fell in love straight away. And then I took this clip where I put down my camera and I really felt like, wow, love Newcastle. And then I saw some rats like literally running right beside my camera. I didn't get it because the camera was over there. So, you know, it's all swings and roundabouts in it. It did rain quite a lot. So I went and found this market called Grainger Market. And honestly, this place, if it was in London or Edinburgh, it would be rammed and it would probably be hard to get a stand, like a little store or a coffee shop or whatever. But here, unfortunately, there were loads of good places, or I don't know if they were all good. I only tried the coffee from this place. The places looked good, but unfortunately there were loads of available little shops. So I should have left feeling upbeat and felt like I've been to this great market in the city, but I felt kind of sad seeing it. And you know, I'm not sure if that place is gonna be there in 5 or 10 years. One thing I loved about Newcastle straight away was that, you know, I loaded up my Google Maps and I was like, okay, I want to go to the cathedral, literally footsteps away from the city center. So I went in there, checked it out because, you know, of course we'll have a look when we see a cathedral or church on a trip. So I went in there and it was nice, a beautiful place, nothing too overwhelming. We'll get to that later in the video for sure. But I walked around and I saw a Danish flag, and me being Danish, I was like, wait a minute, what's going on here? But I read up on the whole Danish connection, and what happened was that when our friendly neighbors from down south, the Germans, in 1940, they decided to get up and take Denmark. Took them around 4 hours, no joke. And after that happened, there were obviously a lot of Danish seamen, a lot of Danish sailors who were out on the oceans, and they were like, where are we gonna go now? We can't, or we can go back to Denmark, but why would we? So they all went to Newcastle and they set up a whole Danish church over there, and there's still to this day an annual service to like honor the Danish Geordie connection in Newcastle Cathedral, which is such a beautiful story. On this trip I stayed at 3 different places, and the first one was Malmaison. in Newcastle. Great place, don't have any complaints. I ended up eating dinner there. I was so tired after a whole day of traveling and checking out Newcastle. Had a little steak, chilled out, went back to the room because I knew that the next day was gonna be the first, you know, grand day. It was time to go down to a place called Durham. And I learned that that is definitely not how you pronounce it. The locals say Durham or something like that. And I took the train from Newcastle down to Durham. It took like 15 minutes maybe. And honestly, taking the train in England or Scotland for that matter, it's always a nice experience. Maybe it's just because the trains here in Denmark are so bloody terrible and tragic, because I hear that, you know, local Brits, they always talk shite about their old trains, but I kind of like it. And it was just convenient, easy, and then you could walk down to the main city centre, and that's where things started to really, you know, fall into place for this trip. So this city sits on a peninsula surrounded by the River Wear on 3 sides, which is why even the Vikings couldn't conquer this place, but more on those guys very soon. Durham is a UNESCO World Heritage site with England's 3rd oldest university, where students actually still live in an 11th century castle. There was this awesome little cafe right by the river with gorgeous views, nice staff. Once again, everyone I spoke to of the locals in this part of England, they were just super nice. So I started out by going on a guided tour, which is something I usually don't like, but this tour was actually great. This is the 3rd oldest university in England, and some of the stuff in there was just like straight out of Harry Potter. And I think they actually wanted to use the main hall, the Grand Hall, the Great Hall, as the Great Hall in Harry Potter, but the university didn't want to do that, but it's definitely modelled after that, that's for sure. Right across from the university is the cathedral, which is considered the greatest Norman building in Europe and took over 40 years to build, starting in 1093. It was just magical to walk around in there. Then for the Harry Potter fans, this is a part that was actually used in the movies. I am a Harry Potter fan. There's no shame in that. I do like Harry Potter, and I felt like my inner kid absolutely loved walking around here. I feel like I could have spent easily one more day in Durham just walking around and maybe going to some of the parks and just, you know, one day in a city like that wasn't enough. So that's definitely a tip if you're coming to this part of England. Durham, it's worth it for more than one day. I headed back to Newcastle, checked into another hotel, got a pizza, got an early night because I knew that the next day was the grand day of the trip. I remember when I first had to drive in, I think it was up in Scotland, and I was nervous. I was really nervous because obviously we're driving on the right hand side, and over in England and Scotland they drive on the left hand side, and it just seems overwhelming, crazy. But the truth is that, and this is just a tip for other guys like me who are coming over there and you know, you want to have a car but you're a bit nervous, after a couple of minutes it somehow clicks in your brain and it just feels normal to drive on the left hand side. So it wasn't a problem, and I've driven in England and Scotland many times now, and it's even on the small roads up in Scotland, it's not a problem. You just take it a bit slower if you're on the small roads, and the locals, especially up in Scotland, I know this is not a Scotland video, but they're used to tourists and they can always see on the car that it's a rental, so they know it's a tourist. You will be fine, just rent the car. You will go far. So it was finally the day. I was going to the Holy Island, Lindisfarne. There are two main attractions here, Lindisfarne Castle, perched dramatically on the rocks, and the ruins of the ancient Priory. This island was the birthplace of Christianity in northern England, but it's also where the Viking Age began in 793 with the first major raid on England, which to me, with my Scandinavian background, was incredibly exciting. If you want to copy the trip, you need to know that the tide actually washes away the road over to the island, which seems mental, and I think there's a massive fine if you get caught and somebody has to come rescue you. The fine is insane, so make sure you check that website and only drive over and plan for going back when you can. Parking the car on the Holy Island, like a place that I've been thinking about since I was 10, so that's over 20 years it's been on my bucket list, and it's been this mythical, magical place that I knew I needed to go there at some point in my life. So when I parked the car and started walking down and I saw the Lindisfarne Castle and the weather was just so gloomy, it was raining once again and it was just the perfect northern English weather. I really felt, you know, this is what travel is all about. I just walked towards this castle and felt excited, happy. It was amazing. Then I went down to the Priory and I walked into the museum slash shop. I got chatting with the bloke and the lady, and when I told them I was Scandinavian, I was from Denmark, they were like, they literally both looked at me like jokingly. They were like, all right, so you're back to finish the job then, because this was the site where the Vikings first raided England. Lindisfarne, the Holy Island, was the first place they went and raided England, which is crazy. They started, you know, the whole Viking Age in Britain started right there, and I was walking around on the exact same spot. So I joked with the lady and the bloke, and I actually ended up getting a small tour of the museum by the lady. And once again, they were just so nice. The people, once you leave the south in England, the people are just amazing. And to be honest, the Priory ruins, now the sun was finally out, the Priory ruins definitely the highlight of my whole trip. And it was just mental to go around there, being in this bucket list spot and just taking in all the history. If there's one thing I want to change though, it was that I should have stayed at the hotel. I think there's only one hotel on the whole island, but I guess you need to plan like a year in advance. But it would be pretty insane to have the whole island to yourself, because everybody has to drive home or away from the island before the tide comes and takes away the road. So imagine staying there and having it all to yourself and sitting at the pub and chatting with the locals. That must be an experience. The last place I stayed on this trip was a place called Duxford Spa Hotel, and that was like taking out of some movie. Once again, this whole trip was like from a movie. It's definitely haunted. There was also a pool, but I'm not a freak, so I didn't film people in the pool. And there was a sauna as well, and the food was good. It was definitely a place that, if you come to this part of the region, stay there. And for a fraction of the cost of hotels in London. This whole trip was filmed in March last year, but I'm only putting it together now. I just felt like I need to share it with you guys because it was honestly an amazing trip. I just kind of forgot to narrate it when I was on the trip, so that's why I'm sitting here in the sweltering heat in Copenhagen filming it for you guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Give the video a like, let me know what you think in the comments, and if you're new here, subscribe.